Hi, my name's Warwick Sinclair and you're watching me on Run Forest Run TV. Hi, I'm Warwick Sinclair and I've just come back from Townsville where we hosted the World Triathlon Multisport Championships, and I was lucky enough to pick up 2 gold and a silver in my age group for duathlon, sprint duathlon and cross X, which is mountain biking with a swim. I was lucky enough to grow up in the top of Australia around Darwin, a small town called Gove, and also Alice Springs. So I did all my youth up that way, and the number one sport for me up there was motocross. So I spent a lot of years racing motocross all around the top of the Northern Territory, and fantastic sport that really introduced me to discipline, to I guess the desire to better myself. After the parents stopped paying for it, when I turned 18, 19, 20 and I was starting to pay myself, I realised how expensive the sport was, and I'd also met my now wife. So I sort of gave up the motocross for a while and became a young dad to 2 beautiful children. And I guess sport took a back seat for quite a few years. I still enjoyed riding socially, some motorbikes through the bush up in the top end. But the competitive spirit went out of me as I started to raise 2 kids. So for probably 15 or 20 years, I lost the desire to really compete in any sport. I did a lot of things socially. If anyone knows, the top of Australia is quite a hard party town. And so I spent a lot of weekends really fishing hard, partying hard, and doing everything to excess, I guess, while still being a good dad, and I hope that that will be something I'm remembered for. We did certainly party pretty well in the Northern Territory. I was lucky enough then, we then made the decision to move down to the Gold Coast in 2004 and not bring any sporting background apart from motocross with me. I met a guy down here who sort of got me involved in triathlon and said we should try a few triathlons. We'd watched a couple on TV, and he said, I think we should have a crack. So what I did was actually looked around my suburb, Broadbeach Waters, and thought, I need a club. I need to wrap myself around some people that will give me some guidance in this sport, knowing nothing about it. The thing I did know about living in Darwin is if you swim in the ocean, you're only going to swim once with the crocodiles. So my swimming was, like all good triathletes, pretty poor. My running was okay, and I really hadn't ridden a push bike unless it was up to the pub to buy a 6-pack for many, many years. So really, I was lucky enough to find a club called Surfers Paradise Tri Club, and I walked in there and spoke to a lady called Jenny Alcorn, and this was 2012, so 12 or 13 years ago. I went into this SPTC club, shaking like a leaf, not knowing where to start, and I was about 48 at the time. And Jenny, to be honest, just wrapped her arms around me and said, you can do this. If you can run, we'll get you cycling. No good triathlete can swim. So she said, we'll fix up your disciplines in that order. And but the first thing you need to do is get yourself a basic bike and learn the bike mechanics and the basic techniques of getting on and off the bike, transitioning from the water to the bike, from the bike to the run. So I went home and said to Vicky, my wife, I've found my club, I've found my best mate. And 14 years later, Jenny and I are still very close personally, and she has done so much for me professionally. And I guess she's actually helped me with some life skills as well that I've needed as our kids became adults and went into adult world. So triathlon in that regard has been more than the sport. It's really brought me a really strong friendship base. And through the club and Jenny and the extended SPTC club races, it's just been a fantastic environment to wrap myself around. from 48 until now when I'm 60. And yeah, so having some background in motocross and racing, obviously I had some bike handling skills. So Jenny helped me work on those as far as you know, tight street circuit racing and training in packs, drafting in packs, and really getting more comfortable around competitors being extremely close to you on wet and dry roads. So there's no doubt the motocross aspect helped me in that regard. I always knew as a young kid that I could run, but I never knew at where that was in the sharp end of running. When I did my first race, it was the Byron Bay Triathlon, and I'd prayed the night before for a flat ocean swim because I knew how bad / good my swimming was. So when we arrived at Byron, it was nice and rolly. There was a few breakers to get through. And so my first experience in racing a triathlon was at Byron in 2012. We got out through the break and I felt I'd done all right in the swim. Turns out when I looked at the results later, I got out second last in my age group, but I then had a pretty good bike session down to Lennox and back, and I ran like I'd stolen it. So by the time my first triathlon finished, I got 5th and in my age, and I was hooked. Trust me, I was hooked. So with Byron Bay out of the way and my result, you know, effectively 5th, I couldn't believe how well I'd gone to start off my triathlon career, if you call it that. And then we were heading into a winter, and having come from Darwin, the winters were still biting me quite hard. But I trained through the winter and was really connected with Jenny and the squad. And we started talking about what's beyond an Olympic distance. And if anyone knows my personality, they know that I really need to calm down. So Jenny was smart enough to convince me to do some sprint racing and some Olympic racing and build not just my base, but build my experience. So I was really angling to do a half Ironman or an Ironman within like 4 weeks of starting the sport. And Jenny was just, Warwick, calm the farm. What we're going to do is build you into an athlete rather than letting you loose on an Ironman and you'll basically decimate yourself and probably give up the sport. So through those winters, coming into the summers, we selected some really carefully selected some races that would, I guess, help build my aerobic and anaerobic base, but also my skills on the bike and out of the swim and onto the run. Okay, so after my Byron Bay experience, we'd gone into a pretty strong winter training program. I'd done Kingscliff Olympic, a Robina sprint, and a few of the other sprints and Olympics around the SEQ corner. But I'd convinced Jenny that she should let me loose on a half Ironman because I want to do an Ironman. So if she won't let me do that, she's got to at least let me do a half Ironman. So we found ourselves in Cairns the next June, so 13 or 14 months after Byron Bay. We're in Cairns, Jenny's racing the full Ironman. She's only letting me race the half, but I'm ready to race the half. And so I was as fit as I felt I could be for a half. And here I was on the starting line of a half Ironman only 13 months after even thinking about taking up the sport. Within about 1K of the swim, I realised this is the real deal. And I was actually in a bit of trouble in the swim. I'd sort of overcompensated, I'd gone out too fast, and I really had to start working on what Jenny had said to me, that the sport at this length and these longer races, it's all about the mind game. You need to stay in control of your mind. It's at least 10 to 20% of your end result. And so I had to really refocus to get myself out of the swim in good shape, because I actually was hitting the wall at 1K of a 1.9K swim. Anyway, got myself out, flew up to Port Douglas and back on the bike, and ran the house down and picked up my first podium for a half Ironman. And here I was, I thought I'd arrived. So watching Jenny win Ironman distance events, not only in Australia but overseas, I really had the bug to want to be able to do a full Ironman. And Jenny could see that, and I guess she could see that from the first day we met, that I really wanted to take my opportunity in the sport as far as I could. So I asked her, when can I do an Ironman? It's almost like begging your teacher for, when can I do an Ironman? And she said, look, we'll just stayed on the half Ironman program under Jenny's guidance, but I'll still managing to get podiums at places like Ballarat and Port Macquarie. So I said, can I please be let loose on a full Ironman? And that opportunity came in 2015 when Jenny had trained me up and I'd gone through the process to get ready for Port Macquarie 2015, which from memory was the 30th anniversary of Port Macquarie, having moved from Foster. And I went there and run the full marathon when I just turned 50. Of course, what Jenny and I had learnt is that if you're going to go well in these longer distances, your age within the age group is fairly critical, is you've got this sweet spot of a couple of years, maybe the first 2 years of your age group to do really well. So my result at Port Macquarie, first Ironman, was just short of 11 hours, but such a competitive age group, I think I only placed 12th or 14th. But the best thing was, I'd really got on top of the mind game of Ironman. I'd got on top of a saying that Jenny likes to use a lot, and I really strongly believe in it, is if you race with gratitude, if that's your attitude, that you'll really have better results. So I'd arrived at Ironman, clearly not on the podium, well short of that, but I was really getting across the discipline that's involved in spending an entire day going through the motions of swim, bike and run. So the following year, which is 2016, Jen qualifies for the World Ironman in Hawaii, Kona, and I just had to be there. I hadn't earned a qualification spot to be there, but my wife and I flew over to watch Jenny and support her at Kona. Yeah, so throughout the day we were watching Jenny just grind down the leaders. She'd come out of the water in the middle of the pack, and her bike is exceptionally strong, and here she is grinding down the leaders and getting herself into a best position. So when she's running the marathon, Jenny Alcorn is leading the World Ironman for her age group, and if ever I needed an inspiration to go harder at Ironman, this was it. I was so blessed to see her win the world title that night, and to me that was it. I said to her when she recovered, this is my ambition, I need to get myself to Kona. This sport, I think most people will agree, is brutal on the body. So timing is everything in my opinion. I think you really need to work as much on the fourth leg of any of these races, the swim, the bike, the run, the nutrition. And I wasn't nailing the nutrition. So in the Ironmans I was doing from 2016 to 2019, I was placing well, but not sharp enough to earn a Kona spot. In New Zealand, Taupo in 2019, I managed to get all 4 disciplines right. I'd always gone into races now with a better mental attitude, having hung around SPTC and really sort of drawn that out of Jenny. But I got my nutrition right in New Zealand and managed to place second in my age in 10 hours 10. And that was enough to earn me a Kona spot for that year. So I was going back to Kona, where I'd seen Jenny win the World Ironman 3 years earlier, and I was going to do my very best. So there I was, October the 12th, 2019, back where I'd been 3 years before with Jenny. Jen wasn't with me that time. She'd moved on to the World Half Ironman program, and being Jenny was winning those. So I was at Kona by myself with my wife, race ready to take on what I think is still recognised as one of the toughest Ironmans in the world, given the heat around Kona. I had a fantastic swim, I had a fantastic bike, and I had a really strong run, but it really humbled me to know that even with those 3 disciplines together and the nutrition all tied down, I still could only really manage the top 30. Coming back from Hawaii late 2019 after the Kona experience, within a couple of months the world was getting locked down from COVID. So it really threw out everything, as we all know, how we lived, where we lived, what we could do outdoors. So it really became a tough 2.5 years for everyone as we all tracked our way through COVID. I kept my fitness up. I took up some trail running because those events were being allowed, because they could separate the athletes as far as COVID concerns. So I took up a lot of trail running, did some ultra trail running, ran to the top of Kosciuszko and back in the 100k Kosci race, but always still had my mind on, I want to go and win an Ironman somewhere, and I want to really pull more out of this sport now because I'd put so much into it. Is it possible for me to win some of the big races that are around? In May this year, I was lucky enough to win my age group at Port Macquarie Ironman, and I was offered a Kona spot live after I'd won it because I'd nailed the 4 disciplines, including the nutrition, the swim, the bike and the run. And I was standing there and I said no to Kona because I personally believe it's one of those places, if you've been there and you've soaked up the atmosphere and you've earned your stripes at Kona, you don't need to keep going back over and over. And I've wanted to focus on a lot of the short discipline races, the sprint, mountain biking and Olympic distance triathlon. So I managed to qualify for Australia in the shorter versions of the races for Townsville this year, which was the World Multisport. I chose 3 specific races that I think I could do well in, which was the sprint duathlon, the Olympic duathlon and the World Cross X, which is the mountain bike component of a triathlon. I went to Townsville in August this year, as sharp as I could be as a young 60-year-old. And my first hit out was the sprint duathlon. And I was in an absolute tangle with this really strong Italian guy and he got me. So I picked up a silver in the sprint duathlon, but it absolutely told me that 2 days later I could improve that. 2 days later I came out and won the World Duathlon Championship for my age group. And 2 days later, I backed it up with the World Cross X Mountain Bike Championship. So I was just sitting in my hotel room saying, 12 years ago, I was drinking and smoking. And here I am now, a multiple world champion at this event with a silver as well, having won Australian Ironman a few months earlier. It doesn't get much better in the sport. If I'm really honest, I'm a strong believer that triathlon has done a huge amount to not save my life, but triathlon's done so much to teach me disciplines outside the sport that I've needed as I've helped my adult children through their lives, as I've moved through my professional career. So my strong advice really, I really try and live with the motto of make gratitude your attitude for a lot of things. You only have to look left or right to realise there are a lot of people a lot worse off than you. But while you might pick up medals like this at the World Multisport events all around, ultimately triathlon, I believe, is a sport that can teach you way more than the physical side. It will bring you friendship groups and peer groups that will assist you in so many ways as we all trek through life. And I've spoken so much about Jenny, but what I've also learnt is it's the people behind you in a sport like this. And as I've gone through this 12 or 13 years of growing as an athlete, but growing as a person, what I've really noticed, and probably my biggest inspiration, is watching my wife Vicky go from the couch to now running ultra trail races all around the world. She got the bug. She's a very quiet achiever. She doesn't seek podiums. She just has this steely resilience that when she says she's going to do something, she does it. So she's probably the biggest supporter behind me, and she wouldn't even realise that, given that just watching her go about her processes to get herself race ready really reminds me what this sport can do for relationships, what it can do for your own physical health. So she's just been an absolute inspiration to be around, and she still is today. Of course, I've had some support from people like Volair, from Carbon Mafia, from Fixed Nutrition, And I'm very grateful to those people as well, because they have to be very selective as to who they're going to back and why they're going to back them. So any support for an old guy like me, very happy to have them in my presence as well. So with being lucky enough to win Ironman Australia, to have been to Kona, to have picked up 2 gold medals at the Worlds just recently, I also know that at 60, the window of opportunity is going to start closing in on me as far as being able to compete at the sharp end of my age group. So I'm starting to turn my attention to ultra running, and I'd like to do a fairly competitive 100-kilometre race, and I haven't ruled out doing a 100-miler, especially if I can do it on Australian soil, where I think I can train in the right climate and get myself race ready, with nutrition being the #1 component that will get you home on one of those. So I am going to slightly switch over the next year or 2 to try and pick up some more adventure racing and some disciplines that I think I'm worthy of, especially given that at 60 the opportunities are going to be becoming less and less as I head towards 70. So my advice really to anyone that might be looking at getting off the couch and getting involved in endurance multisport, I guess my top 3 would be: find yourself a good coach, wrap yourself around good people, and smile, because to be honest, we're doing this because we love it. So smile when you're racing, smile when you're talking to people, and just really soak up the atmosphere of what you're doing.
Run, Forrest, run!